It's hard making this video considering I've been a fan of Jorge Masvidal for a long time. It wasn't his funny attitude or street fighting persona that drew me in though, it was his fighting style. Jorge had a way of making high IQ plays, but when he'd get the opening he was always less conservative than others and more willing to pounce on the opportunity to really take someone's head off. And pair that way of thinking with his slick boxing and body kicks and you get an opponent that was dangerous to anyone he faced no matter the ranking. However, the Jorge Masvidal of today retires 0-4 in his last 4 fights, unable to impose his will in the octagon, so he resorts to more illicit means, and his career record now looks like he was always a textbook variety journeyman of the sport. So what happened? How did someone with so much potential end up a loser? Let's start with the big thing that everyone mentions, Jorge's antics outside of the cage. Punching someone in the street because you couldn't do anything to them inside of the cage is without a doubt the behaviour of a sore loser. But haven't we seen this before? I mean, Jorge punched Leon backstage after his fight with Darren Till and we all loved it. Remember how long people were quoting that 3-piece with a soda line and how everyone was saying he got 2 wins that night? But really though, how is this that much different to what happened with Colby? Sure, with Colby it happened after the fight and hating Leon was the cool thing to do back then.
Who's that? Leon Edwards?
Never heard of him.
But that doesn't change the fact that in both cases it's assault. The main reason those antics seem pathetic is because Jorge is losing now. Sucker punching a guy after you start your opponent in front of his home crowd is cool, but sucker punching a guy you couldn't beat in the octagon while you have an 0-3 record in your last 3 fights makes you a shitty person. Honestly, the lack of consistency in judgment makes it so that we know for sure that Masvidal's antics outside of the cage aren't the reason he's deemed a loser today. Because I guarantee if he won that fight against Colby and then came at him afterward, we'd all be cheering him. And if you don't believe me, look how Khabib is revered after jumping the cage in that McGregor fight. Okay, so if it's not his actions outside the octagon, then let's take a look at who he fights inside the cage. Although Jorge hasn't really shied away from fighting the toughest guys in the division, even going as far as to fight Kamaru on 1 week's notice, I still remember people's reactions to the BMF title and the whole event seeming very gimmicky, with The Rock of all people presenting the belt. And that's not the only time Masvidal has come across that way. Remember when McGregor won against Cerrone and Masvidal wore the same exact robe Conor had worn during his press conferences with Mayweather? And this led to McGregor commenting on it himself.
Yeah, I don't know what that was about. Talk about baloney, because that looked ridiculous to me. Was it my actual robe?
However, I think Masvidal laid out his reasoning pretty well.
The money was the same, I'd fight Usman because I dislike him. They gotta beat up Conor to get the money, then I'll beat Usman's ass.
Alright, then maybe it's a more fundamental problem, a more human problem. Maybe it's his attitude. I mean, we all see how he affectionately refers to wrestlers as crotch sniffers.
You're almost trying too hard to sniff a crotch. Like, yeah, for sure, I'm putting my face in your crotch. He was dying to sniff the crotch. Magnetize on my crotch. His face is a magnet to crotches. His natural crotch sniffing instincts. Crotch sniffing and things like that. Instincts is a fucking crotch sniffer. Go sniff the crotch.
Plus, he always does seem very dismissive and nonchalant in the press conferences leading up to the fights. But it doesn't take much to see that although he holds a supposed disdain towards wrestlers in the eyes of the public, in private he trains with Bo Nickel and even goes as far as praising how skilled he is at wrestling.
The guy's such a stud, and I knew then, I was like, man, this kid's special.
Furthermore, Masvidal has always been humble in defeat and able to understand what makes him lose, even after a grudge match with his former best friend.
I was off beat with the wrestling. I needed to wrestle harder.
It just goes to show that he does care about his fights, and that the laid-back attitude is part of a persona that he adopts to sell the fights and also keep calm during the bouts. The real reason why Jorge Masvidal ended his career a loser in the eyes of the public can be traced back to this moment.
All these split decisions,
Yeah.
and he was thinking, well, maybe I could just have done a little bit more and won that fight. And then he said, why am I thinking like a fucking peasant? He goes, why didn't I just knock that motherfucker out?
Now, although this was the moment that Masvidal started to finish his opponents and live up to his potential, he made this switch in the last 4 years of a 20-year-long career in MMA. It was too late, at least in terms of competing at the highest level. Sure, in 2019 he knocked out Till, Askren and Diaz, but those guys weren't the elite of the welterweight division. Till was slowly revealed to be a hype job given a fast track because the UFC needed a face from England after Bisping left. Sure, he had a killer left hand and was a threat at the time, but he definitely wasn't championship material. Askren may have been old, but he was for sure a threat to Jorge and the division as a whole. And fair play to Masvidal, he landed a perfect knee that he practiced in training, but we never saw him face any adversity Ben might have posed to him because the bout was so short. And as far as Nate Diaz goes, he's a pay-per-view draw, a fan favorite, and always dangerous when he hits you on the button, but really and truly, he's not an elite fighter. Usman was the pound-for-pound king at the time, Colby has an insane work ethic and is only second to Kamaru, and Gilbert Burns has proven time and time again that he is one of the best fighters in that division. Point is, there is a big difference between these 3 fighters and these 3 fighters. So when Masvidal made that mental switch, he had a lot of ground to cover and not a lot of time. And stuff like accepting a fight with the champion at 1 week's notice didn't help. I mean, things that Leon Edwards had learned in his first fight with Kamaru when he was 24, such as not being so afraid of the takedown that you forget to impose your game. Masvidal was learning these things when he was 36 after his second shot at the title, and learning it the very hard way, no less. It's sad because he had so much potential, and if he applied himself earlier, he may have actually touched gold. But unfortunately, it's the tortoise and the hare story, and there comes a point in the race where no matter how fast the hare runs, he can't cover the lost ground. To be fair, the up ticket is that Jorge is making millions now, and can retire a rich man with his family and a fighting organization himself. But if we've learned anything from McGregor, it's that no matter how much money you make, you will always want to know how great you could have been. Thanks for watching, like and subscribe for more content like this.